Welcome back, WrestleTalk fans, and as promised, here is part two of Eric Bischoff Makes a Bold Statement. Yes, that's what I named it because, as capped in the beginning of this two-parter, Eric Bischoff made the statement that they will never be able to entertain on a level more or less to WWE because they do not have WWE's money. Now, to get back in the main focus of that argument, is they did it with less, and they should learn to do it with less. And where I left off the last topic was basically these guys had the world by the balls. And I'll get back into where I left off in a minute. But TNA had the world by the balls, and then it just seemed like Eric Bischoff came along and everything changed. But it's been over the last couple of years, both companies have seen major transition, and not for the better. Not for the better at all. Would you disagree?
Well, I mean, granted, I am a huge WWE fan. You could say I'm a WWE mark. I mean, yes, there have been some things that I haven't exactly agreed with, but I mean, at least one thing you could say is that at least they're doing better than the illegitimate child down there.
See, but you wouldn't like that if it was CWE. You wouldn't like it if all these comments were on the other foot and all we needed to do was change our structure a little bit. And that's really what it comes down to. All Dixie has to do, folks, is, in my opinion, she's got the talent. She's got the stage. She can make it happen. They just both need interesting product to follow. You cannot have your shows end open-ended where you don't know how your main event concludes, because then it just leaves the person to think, well, what do I make of this? TNA's never been good at explaining things, so what do I get from this? Just to give you some numbers, like I said, we would get into that in the second part. And this might be news to you. Like I said, the first live TNA Impact is after Bound for Glory on 10/7. And you gotta wonder, folks, what's gonna happen to reaction, like we said before. They're either gonna have to make it a post-game, a real early pre-game so they actually have time to produce it better, or a post-game like an hour after Impact if they're going to stick with the same format, but they can't, because they're going to be live again, they can't very well jump right into reaction if they haven't had time to prep any of the video. But that's neither here nor there. The average TNA house show now is lucky if it sees between 500 and 1,000 fans per show. So all those people that thought that the seating was getting closer together, you were right. They restructured the seating somehow, but everybody's crunched in there to make it look like there's a lot of people. But in actuality, folks, you're looking at two sets of people broken up on each side of the room that equal out to about 500 or 1,000 people, which isn't even big at all if you consider Truman High School or Neshaminy High School, where we both attended. We held more people than that on a given day, if not damn near. Yeah, we held about 3,000, and that was daily attendance. And these guys are pulling weekly shows, and they're lucky if they, like, I don't know what the capacity on the building is, but I doubt that's nowhere near sold out. This should be another sign. You can't tell me you haven't seen you haven't, like, no one in TNA has seen, and I keep arguing with Mr. Kincade over this point, that no one in corporate on either of these departments has seen the problem. You got one company who wanted to be the alternative and had original ideas. That's what set them apart, and they were quietly able to succeed without getting, without Vince thinking they were any major competition. And then you've got the product that doesn't think they have to try. And then what you have now is you have TNA dipping into WWE for its show. You're basically watching the same thing. Neither company knows what direction they want to go in right now. A lot of people have also said Jeff Jarrett, as he reached his prime. Any comments on Jeff Jarrett? Do you know enough to make a...
Not really. I don't watch TNA enough, but I do hear that. The only reason why I know anything about TNA is because I hear about it. That, and also I have seen TNA shows. I've seen, I don't know, about 6, 7, and every time I'm practically, going into cardiac arrest because it's so bad. But as far as the TNA not seeing where they're going, sometimes I wonder if they don't see it, and other times I often wonder maybe it is that they do see it, except now that they're at the point where who gives a fuck?
Yeah, but
we're
why?
At least somehow surviving.
That's on. I'm not defending this, WrestleTalk fans. I'm not defending McMahon's stance, but that's sort of okay to do if you're big. If you know that you can basically not sell out a couple of weeks worth of shows, not sell anything, and your company's still going to be on top because of its bank account. More or less, that's fine if you're WWE, but how can you say they don't give a fuck when a couple of years ago they were fresh out the gate and had so much to prove? They can't honestly think they've proved it already.
Well, if you look at it, I'm not saying that they proved it. I just think that, like, the way they've 86'd it, the way they turned it around to the point where you now wonder if they're going to be, seeing the light of day next year, leads me to believe that they just don't give a fuck anymore, that we have our big names, and that's what pissed me off. The fact that they still have these big names and aren't even thinking about the other guys. I hate what...
And that's what, just to elaborate a little bit for those who haven't followed thus far, and that they know about this, right? Like, well, no, I worded that wrong. They more or less came out as a company that wanted to push the newer guy, but now they're not doing that at all.
Right, and it's because these legends have these creative control contracts and get to dictate what it's like WCW all over again. WCW had Hogan running around with his creative control. Oh, my character needs to go this way because I say so, otherwise I'm out. Which would be fine if it's actually helping both parties, but it really isn't. It's only helping Hogan.
Well, when you're Hogan's age, I'm not saying this is any kind of excuse because they all say one thing and do another when it comes to contracts. Could that just be Hogan looking out for Hogan because he knows he doesn't have long in this business?
Oh, it could be, but at the same time, it does look like, Hogan's in TNA. Gee, we've never seen this version of Hogan before, where he's all, world title this and talking gibberish the next minute. It baffles the mind that they can hire these people, which I'm surprised they're still afloat because of how much I'm sure they paid them to get them. It certainly wasn't you'll just get $5,000 now. Which would be great if they'd actually benefit from it. From Hogan being in there, and vice versa.
Alright. Well, this leads into a great topic because we're going to need a couple of minutes because we're going to debate this one a little bit. But what do you think, and I want you to leave it open so we can have a kind of a back and forth, but what do you think is a fix for both?
Well,
what steps do you think both companies have in common that they need to take before the outside of them actually listening to the fans? Like, they think we're stupid, guys, but outside of the obvious, what do they need to do?
Well, TNA, they need to double, not necessarily dump, but get rid of, stop focusing on who they were, and with these few exceptions of guys that they have that actually became something with them, like AJ Styles, for instance. They need to stop focusing all their attention on star power. We got Hogan. That means we're great. No, it means you just got Hogan.
Means that if you know how to use them, you could be great.
They need to try to find their focus with these storylines again. Because anybody who's seen TNA with half a brain, no offense to anyone out there who might be a TNA fan, but anyone with half a brain can see that these storylines tend to go nowhere. Either they go somewhere and it's a dead end, and it just seems to go.
And they also have a habit. I don't know if you've noticed this, but they've done it recently, where they'll go to try something, and instead of following through with it, I guess they back out midpoint because they're not sure of the idea. But then it leaves like this awkwardness where you have no idea what that just was that you just witnessed because it didn't really have a beginning, middle, or an end. Like, you don't... Some people that come out, like, it's random where it gets changed up or something happens, but everything's so open-ended there. Like he said, there's no focus, there's no... The governing body, Dixie Carter, is just the governing body on paper right now. She runs to her creative team with all these problems, and I love Dixie Carter as a person. I legitimately think she cares about her people, but as a promoter, she's not playing this how she should be playing it. You should be able to cut your dead weight. Agreed?
Yeah, I agree. Now, real quick, as far as open-ended,
I'm just saying, you've seen them impacts where they don't really answer any of your questions. If not, you've got more of them, you know?
Well, yeah, there's that, but as far as gimmicks go and storylines go, everybody's really guilty of that, but that's only because maybe it didn't pan out the way they wanted to at that point, and they had to backpedal it. But I do see your point. I mean, there's ways...
Oh, yeah, but I just think when you're already starving for ideas, like we were talking about earlier off the air, wouldn't you, at this point, they have nothing else to lose. So what's wrong with trying a couple dead-end ideas? Worst case, you wind up right where you are now.
True, but you don't want to end up with a segment that just is so horrible. Now, mind you, TNA isn't exactly known for the riveting entertainment anymore, but you don't want to end up with something akin to, say, Katie Vick, and I'm sure the majority of you wrestling fans would know what I refer to. If you don't, get yourself lucky.
It's more or less like this, guys, just to sum up everything he's been saying. WWE and TNA both share dead weight. Why? Because TNA lied to you, the fans, said they pushed new talent, and haven't done that so much. They've been too busy competing with Vince. Why? Because Eric Bishoff and Vince Russo are there. So it's real simple, and it'll cut this podcast, right to the point. Get rid of your dead weight. Get rid of your expenses. Stop, using other people's material. Originality and creativity.